Now, what we're here to discuss is the new disaster for Mississippi 4727. That is the disaster number. Please utilize that number in emailing back and forth to us. We have 24 open disasters in the state of Mississippi. I think we've set a record. I believe we've got the most open disasters in any state, and this has caused us some confusion. So if you email somebody, they need to be able to change gears to figure out which disaster you're talking about, because in some cases different rules apply. So we need to kind of know what we're talking about when we're talking about it. So please use this somewhere in the subject line, 4727. That way we're on the same page with you when we start to read it and we don't get confused. So the incident period, which is when the disasters or the event took place in your particular area, was kind of odd for this. It's 14th through the 19th. We're usually looking at one day, one storm, one event. This was chained together enough to where FEMA said, okay, we can see that we can link it together. So that's why they gave us the option to use the time frame from June 14th to June 19th. We got the declaration on August the 12th. And why is that important? And I say it is because you have 30 days. You have 30 days to put in the request for public assistance, the RPA. I'll be using three-letter words all throughout this, and I'll try my best to let you know what it is those initials stand for. So request for public assistance, or RPA, has to be put into the system through us, in some shape, form, or fashion, to lock you in, and you have 30 days to do it, that date being September 11th. I'm begging you, do it today. Do it by this week, at least by this weekend, because it never fails. I have to go beg FEMA to let somebody in late, and I don't want this happen, this disaster. So please, as soon as you possibly can, put in that request for public assistance, and we'll go into a little more detail on how you do that further on. Kier, can you advance it for me? So contact information, you'll have the sign-in sheet or a copy of the sign-in sheet. I have cards. Any FEMA representative should have cards on them that we can give to you for contact. If it's not me directly, I'll be sure to let somebody else know that they can put you in contact with the right person. But my contact information is on this slide for just to fill a hole. So we don't have to change it all the time. Thank you, Kier. So 4727, severe storms, tornadoes, straight line winds through June 14th to June 19th. Declared counties to date, declared counties where you have the option to add more counties by request, through a request to FEMA, and that is being processed now. We're trying to collect some information so we can do just that. So at this point in time, the declared counties are Claiborne, Copiah, Covington, Jackson, Jasper, Jefferson Davis, Lake, Leake, Neshoba, Newton, Rankin, Scott, Simpson, Smith, Wayne, and the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. Again, repeat, if you're not on that list, we are looking to add more. We're going through the process to do such. So bear with us. If you're definitely in, we want to go with one ask. We're going to go to FEMA with one group of counties and say these need to be added. So bear with us. It may not be your county, but it may, it's another county we're trying to collect some information from. So overview, we're going to talk about public assistance and the definition: an applicant, a facility, a work, and a cost. Public assistance defined is supplemental financial assistance to state and local governments and certain private nonprofit organizations for response and recovery activities required as a result of federally declared disaster. I read that verbatim because I really want you to know it, and it'll help you on the test at the end of this presentation. It's a joke. There's no test. Funding is cost share. On the typical disaster, funding is as a federal cost share of 75%. That's the minimum of 75%. For the state of Mississippi, the state of Mississippi is offering and historically has offered, we'll do a cost share of the non-federal percentage, non-federal being 25%. So the half of that 25% is 12.5% that the state will pay. So in the normal situation, you have a 75% federal cost share, you'll have a 12.5% state cost share, and then your local cost share will be 12.5%. So whatever you do, keep in mind, there's still going to be some skin in the game that you as the applicant will have to provide for cost share. In the end, governmental agencies will pay 75% and 12.5% for the state reimbursement. So also with that, private nonprofit agencies only get the 75% federal share. There is no state share for a private nonprofit, critical or non-critical. There is only going to be the federal share. The Public Assistance Program assists in the restoration of community infrastructure as a result of the federally declared event. So there's an event happened, that's why we're here. So that being said, everything needs to be related to that event. All damages have to be related to that event. It is a supplemental cost for reimbursement program with specific eligibility requirement. Remember the test I told you, it's underlined, remember that. Requirement for this funding is it's a supplemental reimbursement, so it's the last line of funding. So if you have insurance that's applicable, it's got to be counted for. So the delta outside of that insurance is what's going to be considered for that federal funding. Donated costs, donated funding. If you get a donation to help with that cost of this disaster, that has to be applied as well. We have to take that into consideration. So last line of defense for this is the federal funding, but the reimbursement, it is a reimbursement program. If it's a large project, you have to prove to us you spent the money. You did the work and you spent the money by contracts, by invoicing, by timesheets, by vehicle logs if it's a forced count equipment. You have to give us something, and on the back side of that, we're going to have the canceled check. If you paid for something, you're going to show us with a canceled check that whole circle has been complete, and that way we can come back as a reimbursement. Now, we'll get into different types of projects, but with a large project, we have to go into that kind of depth. I get audited, not I might get audited, I get audited every day. I have staff that are dedicated to answering audit questions and dealing with audits. So we have to follow rules. FEMA has to follow rules. You have to follow rules. So it's just part of the program, and that's what we have to do to make it work. The FEMA share of eligible costs will be available to the recipient for disbursement to the applicant. So the state of Mississippi is the recipient. We get the funding, and then we have our red tape that we have to cut so we can legally give it to you guys, right? So we're the recipient or we're the grantee. You are the applicant or the sub-grantee. Over the years, I've been in long enough that terms have changed, so I give you both. This way, if I say something, you understand where I'm coming from. All right. Public assistance is not. Assistance for local populations for damages to private homes, commercial property, or local businesses. This is public assistance. I'm not a fan of the name. This is a FEMA-generated name, and I'm stuck with it. It's public assistance. I have to answer more calls and transfer that information because they won't help with their homes. We deal with publicly owned property, your roads, your buildings, your courthouses. Anything that's owned by the public, the government, that's owned by the public, the taxpayers, is what falls into this program. So that's where the name comes from, public assistance. So we do not deal with homes, commercial properties, or the like. Partnership. So our partnership begins with FEMA. FEMA's got the money, they're the king, they got the gold, so we have to keep up with them and make them happy. That's our main partnership. So the state is in partnership with them. The state being me, the recipient or the grantee, educates. Let me back up. FEMA manages the program, provides technical assistance, and approves the grant. Us as the recipient of the state, MEMA, educates applicants, works with FEMA to manage the program, implements and monitors the grant program. So again, we're here as your advocates. We're going to educate you and try to get you to where you need to be. We'll try to look over your information to the best of our ability and give you advice, whether it's advice you want to hear sometimes or advice you don't want to hear. It's nature of the beast. So we'll be here with your advocates. The applicant, the subrecipients, you, identifies damages, provides documentation, and hang on a second, manages funded projects. So starting with identifying damages, it's going to be up to you guys to identify the damages. It would be an injustice for us to come try to tell you what's broke or what's messed up because we don't know your area. Each area is going to be different. We don't know what the condition of the road was in when it got washed out, if it was washed out. We don't know what the condition of that building was in when the time of the event. So it's an injustice for us to try to identify damages for you. So future references, it's important for y'all to identify the damages and then provide documentation and manage funded projects. So you're going to have to do the legwork in this, and we will help you out and fill in the gaps and the voids and advise the best we can throughout this whole program. But it's going to be up to you. The way FEMA has been tailoring the program in the recent history, in recent times, is they are moving to more putting this program on the applicant, on you guys, having to put in the information, having to upload it into the grants portal system. We'll talk more about it. That's the way this is going. Right now, the only federal grant that I'm aware of that you don't put in this information is this. So we're getting to that block grant program where you're having to generate the information, you're having to generate that project worksheet, and you're having to not force it, bad wording, you're having to push it up the line to get FEMA's approval on it. So again, we're not leaving you, but it's going to be more on you guys to get this information together. You'll have plenty of helping hands. Thank you. So here is the eligibility pyramid. This is the first thing you need to think about when a disaster happens. This is how we make sure it's an eligible work, is to go through this. So you have to be an eligible applicant, right? You have to be a member of the city, the county, the state, that private nonprofit. You have to be an eligible applicant to be involved in this disaster. And obviously y'all are here because you're here. The facility has to be eligible. So you have to have legal responsibility for that facility. We have times where, there may be a lease, or there may be a rented property, or they may be, you've been taking care of it, but it's actually owned by the state. And there's no lease, but you're taking care of it, but the legal responsibility goes back to whoever that legal owner is. So we're going to ask you who's the legal responsible party for this, whatever, building, power structure, power grid. You got to be the legal responsible party for it. And the work will have to be eligible, then that can go back into the contract or anything else. You've got to do that in an eligible manner. And then the cost. We got to make sure the cost is reasonable. This is our money. This is everybody in this room. This is our money. This is tax funding, right? This is based on taxes. So this is our money. So we got to make sure that we're spending it correctly in a prudent manner and not just taking the first bid that comes down the line and going with it. We got to make sure we're getting the best deal out there. Thank you. So eligible applicants in this is the state declared counties, cities, town, village, and declared counties, other political subdivisions of the state, Native American tribal governments and tribal organizations, certain private nonprofit organizations. Good. So let's dive into private nonprofits. I think we have only got one in the room, but there is a stipulation to it. You have to be 501c in the Internal Revenue Code of 1954, or documentation from Mississippi Secretary of State sustaining it's a non-revenue producing nonprofit entity doing business under the state law. Okay. Two types of private nonprofit organizations. Again, we're going to have these three letters, three-letter things everywhere. So this is P&P for short, if I say it in the future. So for a P&P, we have a critical services P&P, which could be your fire, could be medical treatment, could be power, water, sewer utilities, and communication systems and educational facilities. Fire being sometimes your volunteer fire departments will fall under this category. Utilities would be your power and if you have water, a private water, if you have private sewers systems. Communication systems, educational facilities, that would fall back towards more of your private schools and your pre-care, aftercare services. And then we have the non-critical, that would be the museums, community centers, libraries, houses of worship, senior citizens, zoos, daycares, etc. Any questions? Facility eligibility. So we're still building on that pyramid. To be an eligible facility, you must be damaged as a result of the declared event. So you have to be tied back to this declared event. You can't have any kind of pre-existing condition or deferred maintenance. We got to make sure that it is definitely tieable back to this event to be an eligible facility. Located within the presidentially declared area, be the legal responsibility of the eligible applicant and not be under the authority of a federal agency. A great example of that would be a federal aid road. The federal aid Federal Department of Transportation is monitoring that. They've paid for it. They're going to pay for it to be repaired. That's going to fall back on them. So that's just an example, but any kind of thing that might fit into you. We've had all kind of different things, but it cannot be on the authority of a federal agency. Post office would be another example. It's owned and operated by the federal government. Types of work. So this is when we get into the categories. If you're not familiar with categories, get familiar with categories. They are what we start and end with to segment the work up. So emergency work and permanent work are the two subsections. So emergency work, you have categories A and B, debris removal and emergency protective measure. A is debris removal, B is emergency protective measures. There is some linkage between the two and it can get kind of confusing. Just talk with us. We'll tell you where it needs to go. In permanent work, you have C through G, C being the roads, bridges. The D is water control facilities. E is public building and equipment. F is public utilities. And G is catch-all. It's other. It's parks, it's recreations. Anything that doesn't fit in any of the other ones, that's where that's going to fall, is in the G category. So emergency works categories A and B. FEMA is authorized to provide public assistance funding for emergency work, including emergency protective measures and debris removal. Emergency work is that which must be done immediately to save lives, protect public health and safety, protect improved property, and eliminate or lessen the immediate threat of additional damages. So if you're addressing anything that's going to fall into this category, it really needs to start to save lives, to protect property. We need to show where the need is. We had to do this at this time because we had to save lives. We had to protect property. It's going to be real important that we identify and those damages that were in direct cause of, direct need for that to happen. Thank you. So category A, that's debris. Debris, and that's going to be a lot of y'all here, I'm sure, is going to have a lot of problems with debris in the area due to these storms. So category A is debris removal. Debris removal is eligible when it eliminates an immediate threat to life, health, and safety. We're getting back to life and health and safety. It's always going to be a factor into this. It eliminates an immediate threat of significant damage to improved property. Improved being a key word in this. Maybe I should bold that. Improved. If it's unimproved property, it is not eligible. If it's a field, if it's a, I'm not going to say pasture, but if it's just a standing forest and y'all own it, that's not improved. Okay. There might be a case where there's a right-of-way in there, like a clean out for a sewer system. We can work around that. That's improved part of that. That's something you have to maintain, but it's got to be an improved property. It ensures economic recovery of the community and provides the benefit of the community at large. Questions? So we're going to get into what to do for a debris or category A project. Is contact MDEQ for staging sites. If you are going to temporarily stage your debris somewhere, please contact MDEQ. They have permitting. They will make sure that you're doing it right. We have a debris specialist within MEMA. If any questions, any doubts, they'll bring them in. We'll get that person online with you to make sure that's done. I'm assuming most of this crowd's probably got that work completed, so we'll keep skipping forward. But contact MDEQ, truck certifications to monitor your debris, activate your pre-position contract if you have it. I highly recommend it. Have somebody on standby, so when the disaster happens, you're just calling somebody and saying, all right, time to come to work. That's a great way to get ahead of these storms, because if not, it's going to delay you a week, 2 weeks to find somebody, get bids, do all this other stuff, do it under emergency, and then rebid it later. Get it done pre-disaster, and it helps you out tremendously. And bid out debris work beyond 30 days. So real quick on this, on emergency contracting, or doing things under emergency situations. So there is no timeline. I've looked through every FEMA publication there is no timeline defining the emergency. With that being said, the idea behind this is that it is in such need to get this accomplished that you do it now. So we suggest 30 days. You had to get it done. If you can wait 30 days to do it, then you could have bid it out under proper procurement and gotten it completed and done. So we're getting the best bang for our dollar, right? So we say 30 days, you're safe. You're safe in that window. If you go outside of that 30 days, we can't guarantee an outcome. So this far out from the disaster, any contracting needs to be done through proper procurement. We got another slide, so I won't spend more time on that. So do not in debris is stage your debris wherever you want. We go back to MDEQ. Let them help you get permitted. Make sure you're doing things the right way. Place debris in unpermitted sites, back to the MDEQ clause. Continue with pre-position contract beyond 30 days, and ignore debris monitoring. If you're monitoring or telling you something, that means they see something that is not eligible or that might cause you a problem in the future. Do not ignore them. Deal with that problem. Most monitors will go ahead and deal with it themselves, but if they're telling you something, you need to have a heart-to-heart with your contractor, because you'll end up having to pay them or go to court with them, one thing or the other. So they're there to work for you guys, to be your go-between between the actual guys picking up the sticks and to you guys writing them the check. So listen to them. Going over to category B, actions taken by applicants before, during, or after disaster to save lives, protect public health, safety, and prevent damage to improved property, including search and rescue, fire and flood fighting, security such as barricades, fencing, or law enforcement, and the push of debris. So I mentioned earlier, a little foreshadowing, that there is some tie between the categories A and B when it comes to debris. This is where it'll be, the push of debris. So if you're clearing the roads and you send your fire departments out to clear those roads so the emergency vehicles and people can move around, and you're just cutting it, pushing it to the side and leaving it. That's not leaving it, that's not cradle to grave. When we're talking about debris, we're talking about from cradle to grave. So the cradle being the point of where it fell, the grave being that permanent disposal site. So if we're not doing the cradle to the grave, that's a category A. If it stays on the side of the road until you can come back again and pick it up, that is category B. Now when you come back to pick it up, that's taking it to the grave, that goes back to category A. Yeah, it's confusing. So if you have any questions, let us know. We'll have people up there sitting down talking to you with it, all right? So there is some differences and reasons why you would want to make sure you identify those, but we'll get into it in a little bit more, a little further down the slide. Category C, we're in C through G, we're going to break into permanent work now. Eligible permanent work must repair, restore, or replace disaster damaged facility in accordance with the regulations. Must restore to pre-disaster design, capacity, function in accordance with applicable codes and standards. Must be required as a result of this disaster. May include cost-effective hazard mitigation. Hang on a second, Eric. So let's break this down a little bit more, because when we're doing this, it's huge that we understand how we're going to go about getting these numbers and how we're going to go about getting eligible work and money back into your pocket. So it must be as a result of this event, and it must restore or replace the disaster damaged facility in accordance with your regulations. So if you have codes and standards or anything else that you have to come back stronger, or you have to adopted after this facility was built and you adopted new codes or new policies that makes it have to be changed, show us that. We can do that. We can make you stay current with your local requirements, but it also has to be restored to pre-disaster design, capacity, function in accordance with applicable codes and standards. So, like in kind, we have to, if we lost this building, the initial number that we're going to look at is replacing this building in the exact same footprint with the exact type of wall, the exact number of windows, the exact type of roof. I mean, it's got to be exact. Now, does it have to end that way? But we have to start that way. We have to get your engineer to give us the as-built and plans so we can check and say, all right, this is going to cost X to build it just like it was. Now, if you feel like you have to go, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but if we feel like we have to improve this or do something different, we can. We have options. We'll discuss it to a certain extent, but we need to go back like in kind. We need to show what that cost is going to be like in kind. And then from there, we can do the wish list or the needs list to what will better serve your community. But keep in mind, we have to, at the very beginning, go back like and kind. If nothing else, it's on paper. We have to have it back like and kind. It must be required as a result of the disaster. Again, it's all got to come back to this disaster. It's got to come back to this event that's caused us to be here, and may include cost-effective hazard mitigation measures. So we are sitting in a hazard mitigation project, right? It's a safe room. We want to harden things. We want to make it more substantial for future events, because that keeps me from having to sit in front of you and yell across the room. So we want to come back. We want to be back stronger and better, and that way the next event won't impact you as much as this one has. So if there's mitigation that you can throw into this, let us know. We'll get into more details on that in a minute. So permanent work and the subcategories are the categories under permanent work. Is category C, roads, road surfaces, bases, shoulders, ditches. Anything connected or supports that road system, right? Bridges, the decking, the abutments, the wing walls, the approaches, anything that supports that bridge system is a part of this. Drain structures, culverts, and cross drains. So anything that supports the flow around that road system to support its primary duties. Thank you. Remember, with category C, the roads and bridges, public assistance cannot reimburse items under other authority of other federal agencies. The federal aid road was a great example, state aid road in some cases. You have to have the legal authority, or there's somebody else that doesn't factor into this on a federal level. Many Mississippi roads are federal aid roads, making them eligible for public work under the Public Assistance Reimbursement Program. Road maintenance records, we are getting killed about road maintenance records. We are asked on every road project, FEMA's asking us to get the applicant to provide maintenance records. So what they're looking at, let's get to what the meaning for that is and what the need for it is. They're wanting to show some sort of record that says this road was not paved 20 years ago and we haven't touched it since, other than drive on it. They want where you've gone out there and put hot patch on it. They want where you've done something to that road system that you're showing proof that you're keeping it and maintaining it in good working order. Because we are getting hit so much. Somebody, sorry, I hate to throw FEMA under the bus, but somebody's coming out there with FEMA looking at it going, that alligator cracking, and this is a 30-year-old road system. Yeah, it's going to crack. You've got to show some shape, form, or fashion that is being maintained. If you're in a city, give cameras to your police officers, whoever, and let them just ride around and video the roads from time to time so you can show some kind of proof. Show if your maintenance is being tracked by some sort of work order, make sure that's there. In some cases, I would be tickled to death if somebody pulled those little spiral-bound notebooks out of their pocket and said, yeah, I kept up with things here. I would send Bob Smith with hot patches to that road to fix it. Just something that shows me that I can provide to FEMA and say they are maintaining the roads. So please, I'm begging you, probably half of my appeals that I've got in with FEMA right now are based on this. So it's not something that's state centric. It's not something that's regional. It's something that is from coastline to coastline. FEMA is really pushing us for. So maintenance records, please, if you're not implementing something like that, please do so. Along with that, and kind of connecting with category A work, if you have a temporary site, temporary staging site for your debris, before the first truck rolls in there, please video your roads around that site, because these heavy trucks are going to demolish your roads. And the only way we have a good chance of getting it prepared is if you have good video before a truck runs across it to afterwards, and see what the comparisons of before and after are. That would make things go so much smoother and take so many arguments away. So if you're doing that, please get before and after videos. Document conditions of the road before and after. Going back to the legal responsibility, know that you are legally responsible for that road. It is not if you are a city or a county, it's not an MDOT maintained road or a right-of-way. If you are a county, make sure that it's not a federal aid road, or a city. Make sure it's not a federal aid road. Public assistance, do we go back? Okay. Yeah. So we're on to category D. Facilities built for the following purposes: pumping water, the drainage of water, or irrigation. If it touches water outside of a culvert or a road system, this is where it's going to fall into. It's going to be anything water facility related outside of those culverts are going to be category D. Category E, this is your buildings and equipment. So we're in a building, this is category E work if anything happened. We have the 50% rule. If your engineer can prove and provide information that says that that building that you have is over 50% damaged, you could be replaced rather than a rebuild if that's the situation. But you're going to have some documentation with that, and you're going to have to more than likely get your engineer involved to get that through. When we rebuild back, we're also going to look at codes and standards. If your codes and standards have changed since that building was built, we'll go back. We'll have to look at ADA. We'll have to look maybe fire codes. We may have to look at any codes and standards that's applicable for that building at the rebuild. It will be eligible for that project. Other things into this category outside of the building is equipment, vehicles, and supplies. Like I said, FEMA is the last source. So insurance will be looked at on any category E project because you more than likely will have some insurance that touches it. So it'll be looked at. We don't be surprised when we start our meetings. First things we're going to ask for is provide your insurance policy, your schedule of values, and any correspondence or anything that you've gotten from your insurance company that's going to kind of give us an idea of what they're talking about. I will, as your advocate, I'm going to say, get the known numbers. Get with your insurance agency. Don't just take it because you know FEMA's going to pick up the delta, because FEMA houses a whole bunch of insurance specialists and they're going to look at it. And if they look at that policy and that schedule of values and they come up with a different number, two things are going to happen. You're going to have to really explain well why you didn't go back to them. Like if FEMA wasn't there, you wouldn't take the first offer. You're really going to have to explain to them why you took that offer and didn't hold out for the full thing. Or you're going to have to go back to them again and go back to insurance and make them cough it up, because there's great insurance companies and there's some that aren't so great. Some of them are going to try to lowball you. So be sure that you're getting the funding from your insurance provider as if FEMA was in town. So you're going to have to get every dime that you're legally eligible to get to your insurance provider. Okay. Category F. So this is going to fall more towards your utilities. This is going to be your power. If you're a city and you own your own water system, you own your own sewer treatment plants. If for some reason you have your gas infrastructure, this is going to fall into this. Telecommunication systems, if you have your own phone systems and 911 systems, or towers for your emergency first responders. Anything that falls under this could be lumped into this category. And again, like everything else, damage must be as a result of this disaster. So this is our catch-all PW. This is going to be the one for playgrounds, swimming pools, ballparks, piers, beaches, everything that doesn't fall in any other categories. This is where it's going to be picked up. Okay. Category Z. We didn't see that one in the list in the slides before, but category Z is your money. That's the money you're spending. That's the money you're spending right now to be here. This can be a reimbursable cost. There is a cap to it. All of the projects that you have written, totaled up, the 5% of that will be what the max you can get under this category Z. So, Stafford Act Section 324 authorizes PA funding for management costs, indirect costs, administrative costs, etc., preliminary damage assessments, meetings regarding the PA program, organizing damages sites into logical groups, and correspondence. So, funding is based on actual cost up to the specified amount of 100% federal funding. Applicants must track costs. So, what that is saying is, the 75% federal cost share for a PW that we said is standard, Cat Z is 100%. So this is going to be 100% federal cost share. Obviously no state cost share because half of nothing's nothing. And it has to be tracked. It doesn't have to be elaborate. If you just give me a spreadsheet with the people that are working under this program, number of hours, their pay rate, their fringe benefits, everything else to line it up. We just need to track this. It's going to more than likely be a small project. We normally don't keep records on small projects, and we'll get into that more, but this does have to be tracked. I mean, at the worst case scenario, if you got a calendar with little kittens on it, and you're putting, I work 4 hours a day to this, I work 3 hours a day on this, whatever we can do to track that time that somebody's spending toward this, we have to account for it so we can get that 5% cap. Okay? Cost eligibility. To be eligible for reimbursement, costs must be reasonable and necessary to accomplish the eligible work. A cost is reasonable if it is in nature the amount it does not exceed that which would be incurred by a prudent person under the circumstances prevailed at the time the applicant makes the decision to incur the cost. It goes back to, this is our money. Let's make sure we're spending our money the best way that we possibly can, and act as if FEMA is not here. Run at this and try to get other funding as best you can, like FEMA was not here, and that way the delta can be picked up, and it just cuts down a lot of the questions at the end. So be sure that you're acting in a prudent manner. Like I said, this is our money. To be eligible for reimbursement, costs must comply with federal, state, and local laws and regulations, authorized and not prohibited under federal, state, territorial, tribal, or local government laws or regulations, consistent with the applicant's internal policy regulations and procedures that apply uniformly to both federal awards and other activities of the applicant. And I apologize to you, I'm standing all in front of you between there and there. So what does that mean? We all got rules that we have to purchase things by. So you have your local rules and regulations, you have the state rules and regulations. Well, with this, we're getting federal funding. We're also going to have to factor in the federal rules and regulations. If you're going to go into a contract, you're going to do anything that requires you to go out to bid, really lean on your attorney. Make sure they're involved in it. Make sure they're aware that they've got to work within the federal guidelines of this as well, because it's going to be the most stringent. So if you're following in the federal guidelines of procurement, you'll be fine. But just be sure that we're taking all of this into consideration. It's not just looked at from the state level. We've got to follow the federal level as well. To be eligible for reimbursement, costs must include deduction of insurance, salvage value, and purchase discounts. Again, funding through FEMA is that funding of last resort. Everything that can be applicable has to be applied to that. Your insurance, your salvage value, you lost a vehicle, you're going to send that to a crusher or a junkyard, or you're going to do something with it, sell it. It's got to be factored in. Purchase discounts. If you buy it bulk and they give you some kind of discount, has to be, and they refunded you some money because you purchased it bulk, that has to be factored in. So last resort, everything else has to be applied first. So we're going to get into force account labor and then subsequently force account equipment. This is people that work for your agency, you yourself, your fellow employees, staff members, as well as equipment that belongs to your statement. So for the force account labor, this is where we talked about whether it's a cut and push debris or whether it's a cradle to grave debris. This is where it's going to, again, get a little fuzzy. If it's a Category A covers regular straight time as well as overtime. So if you're doing the cradle to grave, removing debris to its final location, your employees can be paid for the regular time as well as their overtime. The difference that we're talking about between cut and push and the cradle to grave is under Category B, and you're cut and push only overtime. If it's a Category B project, it's only for that overtime. So again, if you have questions, let's talk it out afterwards or during the process and make sure it's fitting into the right grouping. This does all include fringe benefits, so whatever fringe benefits are a part of it, we'll factor that into the hourly rates. Category C through G is again straight regular time plus overtime. B is the only one that's overtime only. So the best way I can describe this and makes sense to me anyway, is that FEMA funding is anything you did not budget for. If you did not budget to pick up debris at this particular point in time, we're going to cover you 100%. But with, say, let's look at a police department, and that falls under category B, you budgeted for those guys to be out there 40 hours to do their job. So if they have overtime doing their job, they'll cover what you're not budgeting for. Does that make sense? So any repairing a building, you didn't budget for to repair that building. Overtime for your police officers, your firemen, and anything else, that's your public works. That wasn't budgeted. So anything that wasn't budgeted that's a result of this event is worth talking about. Well, let's discuss it, whether it falls into the categories or not. Okay? Golden rule, we got to make sure it wasn't a budgeted cost. For example, if you were going to repair a building and you'd already had it in the budget and it destroyed the building and you were going to do something with it, something you budgeted for. Okay? That was a really far-fetched example, but eligible costs and materials, the cost of items used for the applicant's inventory for any items purchased to make the authorized repair to make the scope of work eligible. Applicant on equipment, the cost associated with equipment used to perform authorized repairs. All operating equipment hours are eligible, should be supported by labor timesheets, rates based on a FEMA schedule of equipment rates. A couple points on that. FEMA schedule rates just changed. I had a meeting like this on Friday, and I told them it was the old FEMA rates. And I got an email yesterday making me a liar. There was one approved for the 26th of July that's going to affect this storm. So there are new rates. Whoever your project officer, your PDMG with FEMA, will get you those rates if you need them. Otherwise, they're on FEMA's webpage too, if you need them from there. Labor timesheets. Why is that important for equipment? Because as a backhoe does not operate itself as of right now. It's probably coming in the future, but it does not operate itself right now. So for us to be able to quantify and qualify that equipment rate and the usage of that, we need to have an operator to back that up. Even if that operator is working in their regular time under category B work, we still going to need something to support that vehicle being used, right? So until it's a robotic, we can prove robotic backhoes and whatever else, we're going to have to put an operator in that vehicle. Types of projects. We've got small projects, large projects, improved projects, and alternate projects. So, thresholds. First threshold we need to discuss is how much damage do I have to get a project written? It's $3,800. If you're here and you've only got $3,000 in the category F or whatever, that's not going to make it. That is also with insurance or any other deductions applied. So if you have your insurance takes it down below $3,000, it will not be applicable. You will not have a project written for it. Got to be $3,800 worth of damages. Second threshold we're going to talk about is the difference between a small and large project. It used to be right at $150,000 to go from a small project to a large project. Now they've increased it to $1 million. So anything above $1 million is a large project. Anything below $1 million is a small project. Where does that fall? Where does that become important? Is because it kind of reduces a lot of headache for us as a state, as the recipient. It also reduces a lot of aggravation and headache for you, because a large project, we have to get all this documentation to support that large project, right? A small project, we're not required to get that documentation. But with that being said, it doesn't remove the requirement from an audit from the future on you guys. So just because I'm not getting the information from you, please keep it. Please, document like you're supposed to for an audit when they come in to see how you spent that funding. But anything under that small project anything under $1 million can be a small project. That also comes into play, and we got a slide on it here in a minute, but comes into play when it talks about getting the project written. It can be done on estimates. It can be done, there's a simplified program that we'll be using for this disaster, and a lot of this cost can be quantified by by FEMA through estimates, and we're not going to require the documentation that we used to. It's going to smooth things along. However, with everything comes a hook. If it's a small project, getting actual costs are going to be an act of Congress, and I mean that in a literal sense. We have to take everything into consideration. All projects will be looked at, and you may lose some money on another project just to gain some on the other, because we're doing this on estimates for the most part, unless the work's already been completed. So it's a give and take. You get money quicker, you get your project done quicker, I can release money quicker, but it could be at a disadvantage because you may not get 100% of that cost documented. But I'm able to get you money back into the capital budget system quicker, and it reduces some of the pain in that. So something to think about. I don't want anybody to say, well, you told me not to wait around and get the actual costs, and you told me just to let the, no, I'm telling you there's an option. And if you're needing money back into the capital fund after this event quickly, this may be the best option for you. But I'll be happy to sit down, the staff with PA, myself, anybody that's needed, be happy to sit down and go over all the details, because I'm going to play devil's advocate for both on your side and on FEMA's side. So just something to think about from going on with this. So types of projects. First two are small and large projects. We went over, there's $1 million threshold that makes the line here. So small projects, funding is based on work completed, if available, or initial cost estimate. We go with estimates if you don't have it, or you hadn't had it done. We can go on estimates, we can write the projects on your certification. FEMA will obligate it. Once it is obligated, it is deemed to be eligible. All you got to do is complete the work if you hadn't already done so, and then we get funds moving. Federal cost share is paid as soon as practical based on complexity of the project. So we want to ensure the work is getting done. That's the goal. Get the work done. So if it's a very difficult project, very costly project, talk with us and then let's work something out. But at the most part, we want the work done. We want to see that work being done. Again, we go back to the $3,800 threshold. Got to be over that. Large projects initially approved based on estimated costs. Funding is based on documented actual costs. Federal cost share is paid as work is accomplished. So large, you got more of a burden to prove, document. You're going to have more of a burden to get the cost adjusted at the end of the day to get to actuals. Payment is going to be typically we're going to wait till that work is complete, and we've got a lot more red tape with us on large projects. Thank you. So an improved project. Remember we talking about going back and like in kind. If we lost this building, we need to replace this building just like it was, at least on paper. After we get it on paper and you decide, I really need to increase the capacity, I really need to do something architecturally different, I need whatever the cost, whatever that wish list is, right? We can do some other avenues, but we really need to sit down and talk about it to figure out which one works best in your given scenario. So an improved project, applicant performing restoration work or damaged facility must use the opportunity to make improvements to the facility while restoring the facility to its pre-disaster function. The improvements must be approved by the state prior to construction. We need to know about it. We have got to bless it. So please let us know. Stay in constant contact with us. May require a FEMA environmental and historical assessment. If you need it and don't do it, this stops funding quicker than anything out there. If you do not get right with environmental and historical people and you violate something on that line, that will stop the funding almost immediately, and we have all kind of hoops that we'll have to jump through to get it turned back on. So within doubt, let us know, talk to us, and we'll find out. Again, just stay in communication with us. The applicant is responsible for the cost of the improvements. Federal funding is limited to the cost of the restoration. So with that being said, whatever that like-in-kind number was that the engineer put on paper, that's the limiting factor. If you want to improve on things, that's fine, that's great. But that cost is going to be on you. We're going to stay with like-in-kind. Anything else is going to be on top of that, right? Make sense? Alternate projects. So when restoration of a damaged facility or function does not serve the public welfare, an applicant must use a public assistance grant from another public facility. The alternate project must be approved by FEMA prior to the construction. A request for the alternate project must be made within 12 months of the recovery scoping meeting. So, still have to get pre-approval to do this, but we'll keep using this building for example. Possibly this building was built because something was damaged or destroyed in another disaster, and it was not in the best interest of the community to rebuild that. So we lost, a maintenance barn, or we lost something, and instead of building a maintenance barn back because we had another option, we had another workaround, we needed to spend money on something like this. So we took that money that was going to go over there, and then we put it on top of this. Again, we got to go back to that engineer report on the initial damage of the like in kind. That's going to be the funding amount that travels over here to repair to build this, but it can take many sources to come over to build this. I'm hoping I'm giving good enough examples, but that's the best way I know how to describe it. You lost something, you don't need to replace it for whatever reason. It doesn't serve the community in that form or function, but another item, another thing can serve the community better. So that money that would have been received for getting that repaired, replaced, comes to this location. Okay? The alternate project may require an environmental assessment. Again, if in doubt, let us know, and we will make sure. Federal funding is limited to a 90% of the federal share of the original project estimate or actual alternate project cost, whichever is less. For state and local governments, or 75% for P&P applicants utilizing the traditional alternate program. So 90% is going to be the federal cost share. Project period of performance. So this is actual work. This is actual swinging a hammer and hitting the nail work. There's going to be time limits to complete this after the declaration date. So that declaration date that we talked about earlier, the period of performance for emergency work is going to be 6 months. Debris, Cat B, that's going to be 6 months to get that completed. For permanent work, the category C through G is going to be 18 months. Okay? So there's going to be time limits to getting this work performed. The recipient can grant time extensions for extenuating circumstances, and I'm the recipient. So if you need a time extension, you have to send me a justification of why. Why do you need more time? I can grant some more time, but I need justification because at the end of the day, I have to prove it to someone else, right? There's always somebody above you. I've got to prove it to somebody else. So you'll have to send me justification. With that justification on emergency work, I can go another 6 additional months. That's 12 months. We can work within that 12 months and keep it in a state level, and within our state. On permanent work, I got another 30 days or 30 months that I can grant a time extension for. Again, same thing. I'm gonna have a letter from you saying why. Why am I not able to complete that work in those 18 months? Now we got 30. After that, the region administrator with FEMA may increase the time extension on a case-by-case basis. So same thing, you'll have to generate a letter saying why you need over a year for category A and why you need over 4 years for C through G. And they'll have to go to Atlanta, the regional administrator, and they'll have to approve it from there. Okay? I would assume keep it with us. Let's keep it with anything within the state. Let's don't get any outside influences involved if we can help it. But we will have to go to FEMA for time extensions from that point on. Note, if the deadline for any project has been reached without approved time extension, no cost past the deadline date will be eligible for funding. It stops. Okay? Stay in communication with us, and we will make sure you're in good shape on that. So special considerations are issued under the program eligibility that could affect the scope of work. Funding of a project. This issue includes insurance, hazard mitigation, environmental protection, floodplain management, historic preservation, and cultural resources. Insurance. Actual or anticipated insurance proceeds will be deducted from the eligible project costs for facilities that are insured. All applicants are required to obtain and maintain insurance coverage on all insurable facilities as a condition of public assistance funding. For flood damage facilities located within a special flood hazard area that are not covered by flood insurance, federal assistance will be reduced by the maximum flood insurance proceeds that would have been payable had the facility been insured. Hang on a second here. So this is saying a lot, and I want everybody to kind of get the meaning behind it. So actual or anticipated insurance. So if we have actuals, we're giving them the actual numbers. I've giving FEMA the actual numbers so they can apply it to the project worksheet, right? If we don't have those, they've got those smart insurance people I was talking about earlier with FEMA. They will give us a number. I would much rather use your numbers. I would much rather you get us the numbers that you actually are going to get or have gotten, so we can put that towards the project worksheet instead of some anticipated insurance, because that's just going to muddy the waters. I want some known numbers in that if possible. If not, you're still in negotiations with your insurance provider. It is what it is. We have to go with anticipated, but I would rather us get that information to FEMA and make it an actual insurance proceeds. All applicants are required to obtain and maintain insurance. So keep this in mind as well. If you're getting federal funding, going back to we are all taxpayers' money. If we are getting federal funding to repair a building, to rebuild a building, to do anything, it's going to be required that you keep insurance on that facility if you can get it. If another storm comes up and you fail to maintain that insurance, then there's no more conversation to be had. The purpose behind this, which I'm a huge believer in, this is again our money. FEMA wants to protect the funding that the federal government is providing. If the federal government is providing you $100,000, they don't want to have to come back and re-spend that $100,000 at a later date. They want us as the sub-recipient to ensure that money that they're giving to us for this repair. I'm a believer in it. I think it makes sense, and you will be required to obtain and maintain. We have had applicants who failed to maintain, and again, it didn't go well for them in the next event. Okay, so just be aware, if you do anything, it's going to have obtain and maintain on it. Okay. Hazard mitigation. There's two different types of hazard mitigation that goes through MEMA. One is the 404 program and one is the 406. What we're going to talk about today is the 406. 406 comes through PA. 406 mitigation, the item mitigated has to be affected by this event. 404, it does not. It is not affected by the event. This building, Scott, I don't know if you were there then, but I'm sure this building was built with 404 mitigation funding. Is that right? Yeah. So we can build stuff with that. That comes through a different office. Be happy to get in contact with them if you're interested in it. But we're talking about 406 mitigation, and that is due to damages resulting from an event. So for this example, pre-disaster, the road, you see the culvert going under the road. That's as it should be. It's working currently and flowing fine. During the disaster, it gets blown out, the cover gets blown out, the roadway gets blown out, and we'll pay for the like in kind. We'll pay to put that road back. We'll pay to put that 8-inch diameter culvert, corrugated culvert, back in place under that road, just like it was. Or we can go and apply hazard mitigation to this, do a concrete box cover with wing walls to support it, to keep it from blowing out again. And we won't have to come and revisit it and repair it again, right? So when it's applicable, if you have something and you have a situation like this where hardening it would benefit this cause, benefit your cause, and the monies work out, it goes to a different group of folks, really smart with calculators, and they figure out if it's practical to do that. And if it's practical, then we can add mitigation costs to it, and we can get it hardened, because that's what we want. We won't have to keep revisiting these things again over and over again. So if we can harden it and make it last the next 5-10 events without the same problem, that's what we want. Environmental and historical preservation compliance. This is the stuff that I told you will stop the money quick, right? Several things scare me in this world. Top 2 or top 3 at least is IRS and environmental and historical. These guys will stop everything in their tracks. So be sure that when we touch ground, if we do any dirt work, if we do anything, please, let's talk with us, stay in communication, and we'll figure out if we need to get historical and environmental involved. All FEMA funding projects must comply with a variety of EHP laws, regulations, and executive orders. EHP review is done prior to funding to ensure compliance with applicable federal laws. EHP review is a collaboration between FEMA, the state, applicants, tribal entities, and local organizations in construction of new facilities, alternate projects, modification, expansion, mitigation of existing facilities may require more extensive EHP review. Biggest rule of thumb is if you turn dirt with a shovel or any kind of implement, let us know. Let us know that we're doing ground disturbance. If you're doing an older building that could possibly be on the historical register, let us know. See if we need to get them involved. Because once we get sideways with this, we just have to all kind of hoops to do something after action. Okay? Environmental protection to ensure that all practical means are used to protect, restore, and enhance the environment. FEMA projects must comply with all applicable laws and regulations, including the National Environmental Policy Act, Magnuson Act, Stevens Act, Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and the 44 CFR Parts 9 and 10. Y'all remember that, right? Okay. Floodplain, wetland management. Any project within or affecting the floodplains or wetlands must be reviewed to ensure that it meets the requirements of several federal laws, executive orders, EOs. EO 11988, floodplain management, EO 11990, protection of wetlands, and the Clean Water Act. Historical preservation and cultural resources. The Natural Historic Preservation Act requires FEMA grantees and the applicants to assess potential effects to historical and cultural resources such as historical buildings, structures, and districts, archaeological, tribal sites, objects, and artifacts. Okay? We beat this horse to death. We'll move on. Thank you. Yeah. So we talked about record keeping. When they went to $1 million, it takes a lot of the responsibility for us to keep up with your records off the plate. We have in the past never kept records for small projects, and we are going to continue to follow that. We are not going to require you to give us records. We have a database that most of y'all are familiar with, Mississippi PA, that y'all are more than welcome to utilize. If y'all want to store records there, y'all are more than welcome. Each one of you should have access. If not, let us know. You can put your stuff on there if you want to keep it. We're not going to require it of you because we won't be audited for it. All we are forced to prove is we gave the money and the work was complete. That does not remove that on you guys. There's quite a good chance at some point in time somebody's going to ask you for the paper trail of this money. So instead of giving it to us, keep it for yourselves. It's going to need to be maintained. I'm going to say 5 to 7 years. I think it's legal. I think they say legally 5, but after the declaration closes, after the closing of the declaration, maintain these records for your benefit. I don't want y'all getting hit and have to go through a painful audit just because you didn't keep the records because you didn't think you had to. I'm telling you, if you get audited, you're going to have to require to produce the documentation. Applicants are required to, thank you, buy project for all disaster-related costs. Documentation must be maintained a minimum of 3 years after applicant close. I go more, because it's a little, y'all may not know exactly when that date that disaster will close. So I would buffer it out a little bit to make sure that you're maintaining it as you should. Documentation that you'll need is force count labor, force count equipment, materials rented, and contract. So force count labor materials that you'll be needing for this is the applicant's payroll policy pre-disaster. Don't give me one that changed the next day that now has paid overtime instead of comp time or something like that, because it's happened. We need to know pre-disaster what that was, what your policy was like at the time of the disaster. Applicant's benefits calculation worksheet. Applicant's completed employee list should include the employee rate and whether they are exempt or non-exempt employees. Timesheets and payroll, and copies of canceled check, proof of direct deposit. This is, again, mainly for those large projects, but if you're doing on actual cost and documented cost and providing it during the project formulation, it may be asked of you, okay? So just be aware that it's there. Be aware that that information will be needed during an audit. Forest Account equipment, applicants' equipment listing, the equipment documentation sheets, employees' time sheets reflecting the equipment operation time and date of use, and the FEMA schedule of equipment rates. So again, if you got a piece of equipment, show somebody's operating it if it requires it. If it requires an operator, show somebody that's operating that equipment. That kind of connects all the dots, okay? Forest Account material summary record, applicant's materials inventory list dated prior to the disaster, materials requisition sheets if available, and invoices for materials purchased and put into inventory, copies of checks paying the invoices. Okay, you can use stuff that's in your own inventory, but we're going to have to find out what the value is either before or what the value is of that material to replace it from back into your inventory. Okay, materials that you purchase, same thing. We're just going to need invoices showing us what that material cost is. Renting equipment, copies of the signed rental agreements, invoices, and proof of payment. Pretty self-explanatory. And procurement, again, we're past 30 days. I'm not going to guarantee or even give you any warm, fuzzy feelings that emergency procurement, how it would be looked at by FEMA. We're far enough down the line that proper procurement can be done. So I strongly encourage everybody to do doing proper procurement. Speak to your attorneys, your legal support, and getting that completed and making sure you follow all the applicable rules and regulations. So appeals, we have exhausted all efforts and you're just not satisfied with the decision FEMA gives you, right? It happens. So you will receive a DM or a determination memo from FEMA, and that will give you your official start date of what you do not agree with. That official date, 60 days from there, you have to provide documentation through Grants Portal now to me, and I will forward it to FEMA with our support. So 60 days for you guys to get it, receive it. I mean, receive it. They can't say, well, we signed it on this date. No, you have to receive it, and it gets sent through Grants Portal. And when you open it in Grants Portal, that's the date, that's the timestamp when you open it. So it's the date you receive it, 60 days to me. And then I have another 60 days, 120 total, to get it to FEMA. 60 days. I keep telling these times over and over again because that's what we got to deal with and try getting anything passed in 60 days. It just doesn't happen in most cases. In certain circumstances, it doesn't happen. Appeals being one of them. 60 days is that hard deadline. So if that comes to that point, 60 days, 60 days. So y'all have 60 days, we have 60 days. FEMA has 90 days. I laugh for a reason. I've never seen one come out of FEMA less than 90 days. They got the crown, they got the gold, they do their own thing. It'll take a while. It'll take a while for us to get a FEMA response. There's 2 levels of appeal are available. One's to the regional administrator and 2 the PA division director. So first appeal goes to regional administrator, and that's the region. We get a determination on that appeal, whether they approve it or disapprove it. On that federal action, if we're still not happy with it, we have a second bite. We can go at them on a second appeal or an arbitration. And we can do the second appeal. Second appeal follows the same rules as far as time as the first. You have 60 days to formulate your response, get it to me, 60 days for me to provide it to FEMA headquarters in Washington, and then we'll wait. The other route that you can go at that point is arbitration. Arbitration is that you go in front of a 3-sitting federal judge, pulled from a pool of federal judges, and they listen to the case and they make a ruling based on the FEMA laws, on federal law, but it's in the hands of the 3 sitting judges, federal judges, instead of the hands of FEMA. Some cases it may be the better way to go. Some cases, maybe not. again, stay in communication. We'll let you know what the history is of that and give you some guidance on how to proceed from there. So time limits, I've said dates and numbers and number of days so much, but it is important. I don't want something silly as an extra day or two to mess up helping rebuild your community after disaster. So remember that this RPA, the request for public assistance, is 30 days from the declaration date. So now, get it to me now. And there will be a recovery scoping meeting where I'll show you in the process, and that recovery scoping meeting starts a clock, and you have to get your damaged inventory, or DI, again, plenty of initials. Your damage inventory has got to be sent in to FEMA in 60 days. We'll do that through the grants portal. You'll have a FEMA PDMG as well as a MEMA project officer to help you and to walk through that, and that's a 60-day window. So it's another one of our deals from that recovery scoping meeting. You're going to have it done in 60 days. So, debris removal operations as a result of the Sandy Recovery Act. Straight in time for forced account labor is eligible. Applicants can retain earnings from recycling. So if you have ash, and for example, and you at your temporary site, and a farmer wants to buy it, or you want to, whatever the case may be, you can sell it and retain that. Permanent work, 428, there's, so Section 428, it's essentially, remember we talked about the alternate and the improved projects. It's essentially we're taking a whole bunch of different projects, we're putting them together, one's an improved project and a bunch of alternate projects, essentially. So you'll get a whole group of money to build a facility like this, if that's what you want to do. We take all these projects, we put it under a 428. It is still capped. It's still capped like it was. You won't have the reduction as an alternate, but it still will be capped. If you are under that cap, we can go back to FEMA, request a project worksheet to be written for the rest of that funding to be used in mitigation work. So if you need to buy fire trucks, if you need to buy something else, we can have another project written to capture that money that was not spent and use it in some other manner, okay? We can spend probably a week, at least 3 days, talking about 428 and all the ins and outs. Biggest thing is stay in contact with us, let us know. We'll be keeping in touch with you. We'll have an idea of what your projects are, what your damaged items are, and we'll be able to better advise you as we see the big picture in this and maybe give you a better way to go if you want to take the option, okay? Thank you. Everything nowadays with disaster work will be going through grants portal as of right now. Some will come up different and better later on, but as of right now, grants portal is the database that we'll use to transfer information back and forth to FEMA. If you're not already in grants portal, we can get you on grants portal, talk to your project officer assigned or your PDMG, and we'll get that to happen, okay? So all documentation will go through that, all letters or correspondence, all time extension requests, all appeals, everything's going to go through grants portal from this point forward. Again, a grants portal is where the RPA is that I would like for everybody to do, but if not, let us know. We'll do it by paper. We'll do it on a hard copy if we have to. I just want to get the time stamped and get you guys into the program. That is through the grants portal system. If you are already on it, you can pull this summary page up for this disaster. It should be a big red banner at the top. It should take you to a page like this, and it'll have, you can't see this, but it should be very self-explanatory, right? It should be very easy to do. I think I've done it in 2 minutes, so I'm not computer literate, so it can be done pretty easily. So go to grants portal if you hadn't already. Go ahead and get that RPA submitted if your county's been declared in this disaster already. If you do not have an account in grants portal, please send us an email. We'll get you one, okay? Things that you'll need to have is your organization, your tax ID, your DUNS number, point of contact, name and position, phone number, and email address, okay? Once the RPA is approved, you'll be contacted by your PDMG from either FEMA or MEMA, and we will start getting the timelines and the schedule set up to go forward. So the first thing you're going to do is somebody's going to give you a call, and we're going to talk about, just the ins and outs, kind of like we are here today, your damage inventory, what's known at that time. But the biggest thing is we're going to start looking forward to an in-person meeting, and that's going to be discussed and be set up at this time, and ways to move forward. So then you're going to have some time. You're going to start collecting the documentation that's discussed on this exploratory call and getting that ready for that in-person RSM meeting. And you should have plenty of time. You will feel rushed, but you should have plenty of time. So we're going to go to the recovery scoping meeting. Earlier on, I said that starts a clock too, right? That recovery scoping meeting, at the date that is held, starts a clock, and 60 days is that magic number to provide your damaged inventory. Okay? 60 days from the recovery scoping meeting to provide your damaged inventory. So during the recovery scoping meeting, you'll talk about damaged inventory, you talk about documentation, special considerations, that 60-day calendar, and site inspections can be discussed at that time. So after the recovery scoping meeting, after that information is collected on your damage inventory and we start seeing the big picture, then we can start categorizing, and then we're going to start building projects in grants portal. And I say we, in the simplified process, small A and B are required, and you very well could be doing C through G as a small project yourself as a simplified project. So you guys are going to be doing that. It's not a difficult process. We'll be there walking you through every screen if need to be to get you there. Don't get too nervous about having to enter this information. You literally can have somebody come sit with you or be on the phone with you walking you through this process. So it's not going to be really difficult. You'll just be doing it yourself. The goal is we get to the point that you're comfortable with, you did one or two projects and you're going to have several, then maybe kind of let you go and say, all right, have fun, and we'll catch the data as it gets processed up through the system. But that's only when you're comfortable. Somebody will be there with you, so don't get too nervous about having to do this yourself. So who should be your applicant agent? So I'm guessing most of y'all, since you're here, probably are the applicant agent. But this is the things that really needs to be thought about when it's not going to be you. Who's it going to be? Someone who understands the elements of the program. Again, there's a lot of ins and outs to this, so just have a good working knowledge of what public assistance can provide. Familiar with a computer, well organized, and then readily available. I know a lot of y'all wear a lot of different hats, and finding time to do some of this is difficult. Find that person that can help you out do this, that can spend some time, some dedication, because you're going to feel rushed. And it's to your benefit to get this done quickly, because nothing about this improves with time. Nothing is going to get better. We got FEMA here in the state working with us. Let's get as much done, because once they leave, because Hawaii's burning, Florida's flooding and cracking down the middle of it. They're being pulled in a lot of different directions. So once they leave, the focus is off of this project. It's harder to get things done, harder to get them obligated, harder to get them approved, and harder for me to get money out to them. So let's get on this and get it done quick, and then we can get funding out there rolling to you better in a more timely manner. So delivery model in effect will demand more responsibility and work on the applicant. I think I've been keying in on that enough throughout this whole process. Pace and priority. Again, you will feel that you're being rushed to supply the required documentation. The goal is to get your project developed so that your reimbursements can flow quickly. Manage your public assistance grants will require that you make your meetings and documentation a priority. Okay? We know you got a lot on your plate. We do. We understand that. But we've got to get this moving, and our job is to keep the focus on it and keep it going. So don't beat up on the guys and the girls that are working with you and you feel overwhelmed like they're bugging you to death. They're trying. They're trying to help you guys and trying to get this funding back to you as quickly as humanly possible. So I mentioned earlier what we're dealing with now is the simplified procedures policy, and this was implemented January of this year. So all category A and B, small projects will go through the simplified projects. If you're comfortable with them, C through G as well. But A and B is required. So you'll be putting this information in together. Not alone, but you'll be putting the information in on this project yourself, and we will help you out walking through those steps. PDMG will assist applicants with providing the required information and documentation. Applicants will sign and certify the accuracy of the information provided. So you'll hear self-certification. FEMA is saying, hey, we spend so much time running around trying to do all this administrative work. We can just let you guys self-certify it. That way you're saying, yes, this is all true and accurate, and then that's what they're going to be hanging their hat on, right, in the project, getting the funding out. It's through self-certification. So responsibility is still going to be on you, but they're just saying, all right, we're going to cut some of the administrative time and costs down, and we're just going to go with your self-certification of the cost that you've incurred. Simplified price. Work completed. FEMA will accept certified cost estimates instead of the actual detailed cost documentation. Require summary documentation to support force accounts, contracts, rental, cost, and materials. Attach the small permanent work project certifications. Acknowledgement applications will sign. EHP mitigation insurance may require additional information. So again, we've already talked about this. It's going to be falling on you guys to do a lot of the legwork on the smaller projects, definitely through A and B. And we have the summary documentation, self-certification that can be utilized. Again, small projects, if the work's not completed, if it costs more, small project, it just is what it is, okay? If it's less, same applies. It is what it is. You'll just keep what's the overage. That's the trade out. FEMA says, okay, it's not gonna, it would cost us more money to track this, funding at a smaller amount than it would be just to say, all right, here is X amount of dollars based on your certification, based on your estimates, and go forth and complete the project. And it'll save us time and money not to have to go back and track that. So if you spend more, it's on you. If you spend less, again, it's on you. You get to keep it. It's not gonna be asked for at a different time, okay? Site inspection work orders will be scheduled for work to be completed damaged sites. If an applicant can provide the damage details, a physical site inspection will not be conducted. Requirements for damage descriptions of dimensions remain unchanged. I understand a lot of this due to the fact that declaration so far after the incident, most of this work's already going to be completed in this area specifically, I believe. So most of the work's been completed. For the most part, and there is nothing to do a site inspection on, but we are going to need information. We are going to need specifications. We are going to need some photos of that, and we are going to need some photos, videos, anything that you can provide us to support that damage happened, age for that event, and the damage dimensions for that, okay? So, I think there's actually two summaries on this, but the Public Assistance Program assists in the restoration of community infrastructure, and again, it's worth repeating, it is supplemental and reimbursable. It's a reimbursement program with specific eligibility requirements. There wasn't two summaries. So is there any questions after that rambling? Cool, thanks, I appreciate it. I know there's going to be more as you're driving back, as you sit at your desk, as you eat dinner tonight, you're going to think about a question or something. You've got contact information. We've all got cards. You'll get a copy of the sign-in sheet. Call, reach out, let us know. Yeah, Scott. As a private nonprofit, a non-critical private nonprofit. But let me say that, and thanks for asking that question. A private nonprofit has some hurdles they've got to jump through as well. A private nonprofit will have to be denied for SBA. They have to be denied from that program. SBA follows a separate set of rules, and they will be asking a bunch of questions. Sometimes we have some people say they're not going to deal with SBA, and they fall out. They don't want to do it anymore. Understandable, but that is a requirement that they will have to be denied for SBA. Okay? Again, 75% federal cost share, nothing from the state. So that'll be the end of it. Okay? Seconds? I appreciate y'all's time to come. If somebody is not here, if you're in a county or if you know somebody in a different organization that's not here in attendance, this is a requirement. We got to check this box that you've got to be here. But this gentleman back here with the camera is videoing this, and we'll have it on the webpage. And then we'll also be able to email you that link. So if you know somebody that couldn't be here and they need to get this, our add-on counties we'll email them a copy of it. So they can check that box by just watching this video at a later date, okay?
Can you get the PowerPoint for that?
I can send it to you. Give some contact. Email me. I'll send it to you. All right. Thanks. I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you.
Hey, it's good meeting you, man.